So probably by the time
I
this
am
podcast
unashamed.
airs,
What about you?
I'm hoping it will not be raining. I'm starting to kind of get the feeling that I need to start building a boat. Maybe there's some kind of message going on. We've been talking about Noah and the Ark quite a bit in the book of Hebrews. We have had some rain. Do you ever remember a rainier August than this?
It went from a drought to a flood.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, I was going home yesterday from yesterday's podcast, which it has not stopped raining since then.
But 36 hours straight.
And, our gate was open, and there was a trash can in the middle of the road. And I thought, typical old man. I'm talking about the old man that I buried. My first response was, the first two words that I got out of my mouth was, "What idiot?" Because I was going to say, put their garbage can in the middle of the road. And then I thought, the rain did that.
Yeah.
The rain carried Al's garbage can, so he was
I was the idiot.
Said idiot, which my apologies, Al, because I quickly realized nobody would do that. That the rain transported his garbage can. Was it full of garbage?
No, they had emptied them. So it was two garbage cans.
Yeah.
Both those.
One of them was laying over.
Yeah.
That's why I figured it out. It had taken a ride down your driveway, made a turn. Of course, it's headed down to where floodwater goes, which is down to that
bottom
pond.
of the hill.
Yeah. Well, it was headed toward that creek.
Yeah, exactly.
Luckily, it had some water in it.
Yeah.
Or it would have been in the creek.
That's right.
I had one fear. I got up. I looked at the grain gauge, was 1/4 of an inch yesterday evening. This morning, I heard it all last night. I heard that rain. I said, I said, I believe it's that. I wonder how much it's rain, but I think it. So I got up early before I came here. I walked over. I got me a rain gauge set up there, a little over 3 inches. I said, ooh. Last year, this happened about a couple of months later, October. We got a 3.5 inch rain, and the dump we've been working on, the whole water, it just blew out one whole end of it. I mean, it was pitiful. I said, engineering flaw. So this summer, we just got it all fixed about a month ago. We went with the concrete truckload after truckload on both sides. That we had gray rock on top of it, cut little things around each end to make it work. So my engineer, and I said, Dan, get over there. I told him that, he just gave me a report. I said, get over there, and I want to know what that water's doing. We got 2 pipes on it, big old pipe, 48-inch pipes. We had one last year. They overwhelmed it and cut the thing in two. But I've been telling Jase, I've been trying to scratch a little money out of him and Willie, like pulling teeth, But I wanted to know if my engineering was up to snuff, but it was. So
there's a Robertson trait that when there's disagreement, the argument keeps coming up.
Yeah.
It's not about getting the money. It's about being consulted before the project is completed. So said money can with
overnight, Al, look here. 2 pipes like this, about 48 inches apiece.
Yep.
Overnight, yesterday, there were just pipes with a little trickle going through there.
It's blowing through there now, isn't it?
It was 2 full pipes. I said, I added another pipe. Last year I didn't have one.
Yep.
This year I had 2. I said, I've got to open
Which, Chase, that means twice the cost.
Yeah.
No, Willie and I got together, and he made me feel better because the concerns I had, he completely agreed with. He's like, hey, now, we would like to have a seat at the table before the project begins. Yeah. If the money is, we don't want to wait after the fact.
Well, he sent some guy down there, and that guy said $100,000, and I'll have you a dump.
Obviously, that's too much.
They told me that. I said, I said, no, we don't want to do that.
Well, you know what I
We're
said?
going to put you some metal walls.
Oh, boy, there we
It's
go.
about 35, 40 yards
When he
long.
told me that, Phil, you know what I said? I said, "Is the dump made with gold?"
Is it chunks of gold?
So we're out, and what was riding on that dump this morning, and when I checked it, see if my engineering was in order, we'd have been out about, I say we, I'm the only one forking out the money. I've stuck about 23,000 in that.
That's
so
the second
I
time he's
stood to
brought-
lose about 23, but I was going
But
to try
Phil-
to please old Jace and Willie out the door, you know.
Phil, you
I
got to
like
realize
it now, though, that you're using the podcast to shame him into to give him
everything-
this is
held-
one flood, Phil. This is one. You know how many is gonna happen from this point forward? That's why. Look, I realize it's a hard thing to
So
do.
look, you got the dump now. It's just been put in. It's not even the fall yet. I'm gonna plant little bitty cypress trees on both sides of that dump, to where the roots from them cypress trees are gonna help hold that thing together.
See that now, Dad is married.
You're gonna plant those trees just because it's gonna make you feel better about spending $20,000 on a water.
No,
control
it's to
tree.
protect the investment. Them cypress trees, them roots start going out, then in the dirt. That's what the beavers do. They build them a dam, and I look up after a few years. If I don't tear it out, I look up and they got trees on button willows or
Well,
little
Dad, you know,
You're pretty optimistic about your future. which-
yeah, I like that. Did you know that you're always hearing about carbon emissions and greenhouse gases? The greatest carbon eaters on the planet, trees. The trees are what eat all the carbon. That's what they take that. That's natural for God put
right.
that here for that reason.
That's right.
So they're talking about all this imbalance, and they're right. You know, it changes weather patterns, but a lot of it's because we're clearing out, whole areas of trees
Oh,
for subdivisions.
the
and-
new Green Deal is people have been bowing down to the creation ever since God put them here.
right.
I mean, they've got poles, and it'll have a lion's head on it, some kind of animal. It's up on or somebody's their face. They all bow down to it. They've been doing that then they still doing it to this day. They worship the Creator.
Well, what's
mean,
bad
well,
is
We're going to get into
creation
that in
more
the
than
end
the Creator.
in the Hebrews.
right.
you know.
We agree on a lot of things, but it's just the question is how do you get to solution, and that's where you get into some crazy
correct.
stuff, which is insane.
But you see a lot of strange things when it rains this much in a short period of time. I mean, this morning, I looked out my window toward the pond, and something caught my attention. I looked, and there was 2 whistling ducks, Mexican tree ducks.
Oh, yeah.
that has come from Mexico.
Yep.
And,
I heard 'em.
and decided that they're going to make their family in that pond behind my house in the middle of a subdivision.
Yeah.
They raise in hollow trees like the woodies do.
Yeah. So, but what I found fascinating is there's so much rain that I guess they got confused because they were circling my pool. And they go down and go back up. I said, I need some decoys. And so I was trying to explain that to Missy, and she's like, "Now, what are they? I mean, they're from Mexico. I mean, are they? But it was like
They speak Spanish.
trying to explain.
They have big feet. Their feet are big.
It was kind of like
They
trying
say
to.
they're good eating. I've heard they are.
Well,
Is there a season on? I mean, do they?
I'll take that challenge.
They're part of they moved up from South America.
Oh, okay.
Well, check this out. They had a little one in the pond. I'm sure there was a brood.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Only one survived. There's one, so it's a little family.
The
there. I've been
varmints
watching.
are bad on them.
Yeah, the coons and the snakes and everything else got out.
Alligators,
I can only do so much.
hawks, owls, eagles.
Yeah, vermin.
Something's feeding on them all the time.
Yeah. Well, I noticed when you drive in the neighborhood, Jace, one of our neighbors, before you get on our street, it's been so wet that he has a grove of mushrooms that are growing that is about as big as this table right here.
Yeah, they're in my backyard. I don't know what.
I mean, that's from all that damp, I guess. I mean, but
Yeah.
I mean, I never seen one so big in somebody's front yard. You could go out there. I don't know if they're edible. They're white.
Certain ones are, but certain ones are surely.
No, it's funny you said that because I told the guy that runs that recovery place. I said, I need one of your, and we need to make sure he's on the other side of the rehab to identify what mushrooms these are growing in my yard. I was like, no, I don't want him, putting them in his pocket.
Yeah.
I just, because they're big.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got one.
The Cajuns got a little
bigger than a plate.
They got a little
dinner
thing
plate.
song. If it says, it's good. If it's that, it's a killer. I mean, they've got a
didn't
little
find
deal
that
going.
out.
Well, there's one particular kind. I was watching a special on this the other day. I wish I could remember the name of it. That people come looking for them in Louisiana.
Yeah.
And because they're such a delicacy, they're really good. But I can't remember the name of them. They grow in ditches.
Sure, there's a mushroom expert out there who, hopefully came to Jesus at some point.
Well, so Unashamed Nation, send us an email with some.
This one's white. And one of them is it's bigger than a dinner plate.
Wow.
I mean, huge. And it just came out of my backyard.
It sounds good if you could cook them down, a little butter, whatever, cook them down.
I love mushrooms, but
also,
I've always been a little leery.
You run down the street, frantically.
Yeah.
Wondering where your clothes are.
If you see naked people running out of that place, it's screaming. That's
no good.
No good.
But they're acting crazy without mushrooms, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Do they drink it? I don't. How did that?
I don't know, Al.
I don't know.
We're going down a road of which
I didn't. Well, I guess none of us
thankfully have zero experience other than putting some mushrooms in one of my favorite meals that we do. Yeah. Oh, here we go. In Louisiana,
boletes,
oyster mushrooms, and
that's the one I was
saying. Mushrooms are all common in the wild.
Chanterelle, that's the one I was saying.
And prize. Okay, this one on the right, that's what I got, but a bigger version. Well, I could have ate that thing.
Especially tasty, it says. There they are.
That's them.
Yeah, the chanterelle, that's the one I saw that's like people come here from other states to pick them because they're really good.
Well, man.
Now, there's poisonous white mushrooms in the yard. That looks like my neighbor's stuff.
Yeah. I should have. I may when I get home and take that mushroom and then get the round steak, brown the round steak, put the mushrooms and the onions in it, put it in the oven.
Oh, you bet you.
What do y'all call that? We eat that from time to time.
Oh yeah,
I don't know.
Like a meat
Other
stack.
Call it good eating.
Speaking of great meals, Jessica, Jeff's wife, because they, we do beans and rice once a week.
Yeah,
and they said, look, now that we've moved back,
they want to get in on that.
They just said, what's the schedule for that? Because they want that every time we do it. Missy makes that cornbread. There's something. I mean, it's a happen. So they decided to do a trade. So she's been bringing meals down and sampling them. So it's like y'all got that. That's going to be a part of our fabric of our existence from this day forward.
Yep.
The beans and rice and the cornbread, we're in. They're there every time we have them. But they said, we want to bring something. So like one night we'll have. So they've been trying things. Well, she hit one last night. Because, I mean, it's all been good, but it hasn't been worthy of a day of the week for the rest of our life.
It hasn't risen to the level of in the slot, in the rotation.
The beans and rice, Missy's beans, she's got the, some kind of seasoning from South America, and she's got the cornbread. Something has happened there that it draws people like, man, it's awesome. It's my favorite meal we got going.
It's a great way of practicing hospitality. The Robertsons are famous for it.
So
Jessica, and even enjoying your brothers. Hang on, Jase. Let's take a break. So I'm excited to talk about one of our sponsors we hadn't heard from in a while, and that's Moink. Which, Jase, that's moo plus oink.
Got it.
We learned what that was the other day from Zach when you put two words together. So Moink is their name. They're a meat subscription box company, and they're really on a mission to fight for the family farm. They're located in rural America. They're run by an 8th-generation female farmer, which is fantastic. I love that because I love the idea of legacy. They deliver grass-fed and grass-finished beef and lamb. You got pastured pork and chicken, Alaskan salmon that comes straight to your door. So they're Moink farmers. They farm like our grandparents did. Dad, you can appreciate that.
Yep.
Unlike the supermarket, they give you total control over the quality and source of your food. You can get ribeyes to chicken breast to pork chops to salmon fillets. A really great group. Shark Tank host Kevin O'Leary called Moink's Bacon the best bacon he's ever tasted, which I love me some bacon. So keep American farming going by signing up. Keep American farming going by signing up at moinkbox.com, moinkbox.com/Robertson. Right now, listeners of Unashamed are going to get free filet mignon in every order for a year. Jason, I like the sound of that. That's 1 year, the best filet mignon you'll ever taste, but for a limited time. So that's Moink, MOINK box.com/Robertson. Check them out.
So she brings a meal last night. It was in a little Tupperware.
I called her Miss Lottie Da.
Well, let me tell you, Miss Lottie Da knocked it out of the park.
She did?
She said it was a beef stew.
Beef stew.
Now, when you hear beef stew, you ain't jumping up and down. And I just took a spoon and just the soup part of it. When that hit my lips, I said, wait a minute.
Wait a minute.
Hold on.
Miss
Then
Lottie
I
Da.
said, let me look what we got in here. Now the components. And I saw some little potatoes, and I saw some beef that looked like a very quality grade of beef.
A lot of times when people think soup, they throw in everything they carved off.
Well, I found out later that this is 4 filet mignons cut up in this thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, we had some green beans, and there was some carrots, and there was a few other things. I saw some celery. I'm going to tell you now, it was one of the best things I have ever eaten in my life.
Yeah.
I wonder if she uses mom's soup recipe.
It was... I actually said
Her mother
now that
really
you put
can
me on
bake
the
real
spot.
well.
Yeah, she can.
I
Her
said,
mother.
you took mom's soup. She took it way up a
took
notch.
it up a
Well,
notch.
obviously, she cut up some filet mignon. I mean, that's next level. I wouldn't even. Who would think of this? What kind of mind would think of doing that? So we have officially got now 2 nights of the week, Al. So if y'all want in,
Well,
y'all
our
got-
night will be steak night because my daughter has gotten into a pattern. Nan, she goes down to Brookshire's with there's a handful of old people that go down there. And so Anna's figured out at 7:00 in the morning, they put out meat that needs to be sold quicker because they've had it a bit. And so it doesn't go in the regular bin. Well, when they do that, they cut it down about half price, which these days is about what it should be. But that's all your prime fillets, your prime ribeyes. But most people just don't buy that because it's still expensive. But Nan, so every day she comes home with anywhere from 5 to 10 steaks. And so we eat steak pretty much 5
everybody's
nights
got to
a week.
have somebody like Anna in their family because she's the same woman that'll stand in line 3 hours for a king cake.
Yep.
That's handmade.
Yep.
I mean, she
And
just,
buy one for you and not just as a gift. Just
just
like,
brings it,
She
sets
sent
it on
me
the table. Of course,
She sent me a cake the other day. I don't know who brought it in there, but they said, Nan sent you a plain cake.
she made it for you. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
you know what keeps that coming, Phil?
She's a very serving.
Whenever
woman.
I see her, whatever money I got on me, I just give it to her.
Smart.
I never say what it's for. But
Well,
I just look up every so often, and there's some goodie on my table.
But it's kind of like you, Jace, because you were saying when you came in today that
She's not like a lot of people. Oh, I know. That's right. She goes there and takes it, doesn't she?
Oh, she takes it.
Oh, yeah,
She don't
she-
even say thank you. She just puts it in her
she just nods her head
We
and
have
moves
an
on.
agreement here that I like.
Without a
All
word
right.
being said.
But
Yeah.
you were saying that this morning we were walking in. You were talking about Mia sending you a worship song at 6:30 before you even woke up. And you were
Yeah.
talking about how, man, you're like when your kid does something like that, you feel pretty proud of them. But I'm like that with Nan. She's always been a very loyal kid and now a grown woman, but she's only been married 20 years, which is hard to believe.
She is a hard worker.
She works hard. She's very loyal. She's good to people. And so, when your kids grow up to be good adults, it makes you feel good.
Oh, you better believe
Oh,
it.
she's a quality human being.
Yeah.
Back when I was kind of running Duck Commander, she was the best worker out of the whole lot.
She's been there since she was 15.
I'm
Jay.
talking about she worked in the warehouse when I was there, and
Yeah.
I mean she'd outwork any man that we had there.
Oh, yeah.
And she
She
never
never stops.
and never said a word about it. You know,
She still does. You know what's amazing? Most people probably don't know this on the podcast. Nan she was 29 weeks when she was born. So that's like 11 weeks early. And this is in 1986. So it's not like we weren't quite as advanced as we are today with, neonatal unit. She weighed less than 2 pounds. She was 12 inches long.
And she had heart surgery.
She had heart surgery a month into it because she was losing weight. Because when you're born early, sometimes those ducts don't tie off when they're supposed to.
Yeah.
So that Iranian doctor, he was the private physician of the Shah of Iran.
Really?
Yeah. And so you remember in the 80s, they got them all out, when they got the,
Yeah.
hostages out. Well, he came out with them. And he winds up in Monroe. He's a renowned...
working on your daughter.
Working on my daughter. He can't speak hardly any English. He's trying to explain to me what, I'm 21 years old. He's trying to explain to him what he's going to do. And the nurse is kind of halfway interpreting. But the one thing I did get, he said he had to go in and tie off this duct. And the duct was the size of one single cat hair. You just think about that for a second. You can't even hardly see a cat hair.
Yeah.
And so that's what he did. And so she started gaining weight. So what I'm saying is, and look, we were in there every day, and a lot of people can relate to this, and we'd come in for a shift. Back then, you could only go see them 3 or 4 times a day. And there'd be the bed that was right here that the baby was here from yesterday, no baby. This was every day.
That one didn't make it.
That one didn't. And so, you're watching this in real time every day. So you realize the gravity of the situation. This is your child. And yet to see her grow into the woman she did, and then she had 3 big old 9-pound whopping babies herself. And you think, man, God created an amazing thing.
All female.
Yep.
Yeah, I reminded Stone, the boy that married her, I reminded him that the Lord was punishing him for his past transgressions by giving him a house full of women.
I guess he did me too, because that's all I had.
He said, well, boy, he sure put it on me. But his daughters are like woods women. They.
Oh man, that BK, she's something. She's got a little bit of you and mom in her.
Yep.
She'll kill something in a heartbeat, and then she'll
bake
cook it.
Cakes.
Yeah. She's quite the
deer slayer.
Well, you're proud of your kids. You hope they turn out good. You do the best you can with them, and then you got to turn them loose, right, Judge?
Well, I'll tell you, boy, something. Y'all did remarkably well raising your children. I know it was a hassle, but I mean, it's just the way it is.
Well, I was on somebody else's podcast recently, and we were talking about the power of generational faith. And I was telling them, I said, that's the one strength that goes through it. And we had it, but it went back to your parents. I mean, we got to spend time with them. We were kids, and Jason and I especially, we spent the most time with them. And I'm telling you, that makes a difference. They imparted wisdom into me that then I was able to have in the banks. And then when I got lined out, I'm able to pass that on.
Yep.
And now Jason and I are the patriarchs in our own crew,
Well, it's a good thought, because when you get to 12, I mean, you realize this, the hardship and things happen in life.
And it's going to happen.
And maybe the weights that, when he said, let us throw off the weights that hinder. And different translations, have different phrases, and the sin that so easily entangles, and which is what we're going to talk about, for the next couple of podcasts. But, he goes on down, and he has this beautiful picture of, in verse 7, enduring hardship as discipline, God is treating you as sons. And it made me think that, God is the perfect father. He's the perfect parent in his wisdom, in his action.
He's never going to guide you down the wrong path.
So, I mean, here we are. We try to be parents, do the best we can, but let's face it, we all make mistakes.
Right.
And I think acknowledging those at some point is helpful, with your kids.
Yep.
I mean, because I think, when they're teenagers or when they're right before teenagers, it's all hands on deck. It's a battle. You don't have time to acknowledge the mistakes at that moment. You're not even noticing them.
Right.
But I think if your heart's right, you do the best you can, and you have your priorities right, which is, your number one job should be to get them to heaven.
That's right.
Number two, to love their mom, or if you're a woman, love your husband, and then try to put them in positions to succeed, for the kingdom and for the family, and how they treat other people. But you're still gonna make mistakes. But it is a great thought to realize that God's not going to make any mistakes in His parenting of us,
Right.
and so that's where you get back into this trust thing, especially when things are not pleasant or life seems difficult.
Yep.
So and he's
And by the way,
he's going to get into that.
Let's take a break. So one of the things that guys tend to notice is when they're losing their hair, you tend to kind of want to hide that sort of thing. You're wearing more ball caps, whatever, just to try to deal with the idea about going bald. And it's not a pleasant thing, especially for young men. And one of our sponsors that's been with us from the beginning is a company called Keeps. And Jace, we've always kind of laughed because we're like the hairiest people, on television. And yet, we talk a lot about Keeps because we want men to keep their hair. And we know that hair loss can be tough, especially for young men. So Keeps is a clinically proven FDA-approved hair treatment that's available online. So you don't have to go somewhere, no waiting rooms. It's safe. They have physicians that help you select the right product. And they're also available 24/7 if you have any questions. They're going to deliver your product straight to your door at about half the cost. So if you're losing that hair and you're young especially, you might want to check these guys out and keep it. Go to keeps.com/door. You're going to get 50% off your first order. That's KEEPS.com/door. Keeps.com/door. By the way, Jace, that's how you break a generational curse. You just said it. So, because I've heard people say, well, that's great, your family and all. I mean, that must be great to have, generations of faith and trying to work your way through. But I had a terrible father. I had a terrible situation. But my thing back to them is that's all the more reason you need to trust God, because you may have had a crappy dad. I get it. But what I'm saying is He's the perfect father. So He can help you break the generational curse where then you're not a crappy dad, because that's what happens when it passes on. So
yeah. That verse 10 says that. It says, our fathers disciplined us for a little while as they thought best. Or, for their, one version says something along the lines of, from their perspective.
Yeah.
Which they get something out of, I think, is the implication there. But God disciplines us for our good, that we may share in His holiness. And you just think about that. He's only allowing this to happen or doing this for your good. I mean, and it's not just a cliche.
Right.
I've said that to my kids. I'm doing this for your own good. But in the back of my mind, I was thinking, I'm kind of enjoying this myself here, and I'm not sure this is going to work.
It's like when you discipline your children for making too much noise. Part of it is because they're getting on your last nerve,
right.
But part of it is because they don't need to run around like a bunch of wild horses.
Yeah.
Settle down. Dad used to always say, "Calm down." That was
But see, my wife helped me, with what I thought was yuppie ideas. When we were having our kids, which we have a little one now, but because I remember one thing that she did that I thought was really impressive that we never did, because we always in our family everything was a response. You go to somebody's house and you cut up. Well, let me tell you something. The hammer's coming down so it was like everything you responded. But I remember one thing she did with our kids, even when they were little. I mean, old enough to understand the English language. But she would be like, now here's what's fixed to happen. She'd sit them down. Like, we're fixed to go to somebody's house. And here's what I expect from you. And she would lay out the expectations before we ever went in the house. And you know what I noticed?
The behavioral protocol
is that they followed the guideline.
Yeah.
It's like once you had, now, so if you didn't have the conversation, you then responded. And I thought, boy, that was genius. Where'd you come up with that? She's like, What do you mean? I mean, I read parenting books. They need to know what's expected when I go down here.
I get out
No.
some. That's what
Yeah.
she said.
But I don't know. That just popped into my
So
head.
you're next to the oldest. He's a 4.0 brain, but he's out, raising chickens in Tennessee.
Yeah.
I mean,
Shows you that
he-
God
is he-
also
kinda
has
looking
a sense
forward
of
maybe
humor.
just a little bit to get out of the chicken business, or
He's made like this.
I think it's there's some genius in that. You go study,
he is
you get a degree,
4.0 walking down
you
the
get a-
road. I mean, he's
you get a degree in philosophy, and then you say, you know what? Not much better than sitting on a porch raising chickens and goats.
It sounds like to me he kind of took First Thessalonians 4 to heart.
he'll find his way.
There's
He
some-
won't end
there's
up
some-
doing
there's-
food raising chickens. Nope. He's going.
I like raising chickens. Phil.
Yeah.
There's a simplicity involved in that.
Oh, I know it, but
that is, I think it's real.
what does it
mean-
cost these days to get a couple of degrees? I'm just saying, if you get out, of course, here I am talking. I have a couple of degrees. And I ended up sounding like building devices that sound like birds and fishing,
That's what I'm talking about.
selling fish. So
Maybe
my education.
Maybe he's like you, Dad.
Maybe he
all it gave
influenced
me
you.
was a little bit of insight into the world's education system. I wasn't very impressed with it.
Well, I was talking about this with Carly's her boyfriend, because he's a young man, he's about to turn 18. Kind of always had his mind on going into the military, but now he's kind of got roots here and got a girlfriend. He's not sure that's what he wants to do. But I was telling him, I said, look, you got to figure out what you can do for a while. You don't want to be doing something you hate. I mean, sometimes you have to for a bit, for a season, but you don't want to be there for 30 years. So you got to figure out something that, I don't mind doing this, or I like doing this, and then make your commitment there. But I said, you're young. You got to try some.
Majored in philosophy. Was that it? I mean, did he have? I thought he had a few more.
He had a couple of
degrees. I mean, he was doing other
degrees.
stuff.
He has one and something else.
Philosophy and Bible.
Bible.
But what I'm saying is you realize that I think life itself is God's way of educating all of us. And
Which is kind of the point of Hebrews 12.
He graduated from Pepperdine, right?
I mean, what I'm saying is life is the classroom. And so I think you need that balance because, where's the verse that says knowledge puffs up, but love builds up? It's more who you know is what I've concluded, in that knowing that God knows you.
But sometimes you have to aim them too, like this. I was telling you about Joey. He likes to work. He likes to be outside. I mean, he helped me when he went down to the southern layer. I mean, a guy like that probably needs to work with his hands for a living. I mean, he's good at it. He's strong. He doesn't mind doing it. A lot of people don't want to work outside. It's hot. It's this, that, and the other. But some people are just good at it. So I said, look, you can own your own company. I mean, I tell you what, every time I move into a new house, guess who I call? I got to call an electrician. I got to call a plumber. I got to call this guy or that guy. And they're people that work with their hands, and they make good living and good money.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
When you think about that Acts 17 passage where it said that God, gives us life, breath, everything else, he determines the time set for them and the exact places where they should live. He did this so that men would seek him and reach out for him and find him. So I truly believe that God, as the ultimate parent, uses life to educate and direct people towards him.
Yeah.
And so, sometimes, you can go study all you want, you can learn, you can be smart, but some of the greatest ideas I ever had was sitting on the porch staring at some chickens. You know what I mean? Or, on a crawfish farm. Because, when you know the Creator, and you know that he knows you, you tend to look at this thing from the bigger picture. And so what we call the elite in our society are some of the dumbest people you'll ever meet.
And selfish.
Yeah, just self-absorbed.
Yep. Absolutely.
So these Hollywood moguls, or these, the most successful stockbrokers, what are they going to do with it?
Yeah.
What are you going to do with it?
Well, and then they're the ones that have this guilt complex about whether it's minorities or somebody else, and they come up with some of the worst policies you've ever heard and divide people. I agree with you there.
You just get
they're not helpful.
You
in our society.
You get into a building bigger barn type mentality, or trying to change society in some way that you feel that would be beneficial, but you still don't have the answers.
Like you said it the other day, Jason, on the other podcast. Without Jesus, what have you got? At the end of the day, you're in trouble. Let's take another break. Well, let's read those first 3 verses.
I've been wanting to get here since we started.
This is a great chapter, and it's a great follow-up. And from your outline that you gave us in the last podcast, so the hope is a big part of this.
You start with chapter 12.
Yeah, chapter 12.
It says, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, and we kind of discussed that, I think that distracts people from the greater meaning here, because people then ask the question, oh, well, are these people watching us? So I think a good question is, what did they witness?
Right.
And I think
it's obviously talking about
answer.
the people we just talked about in Hebrews 11.
Well, what did they witness? What did all the people in Hebrews 11 that are mentioned, what exactly did they witness? Because that's what I think he's talking about.
Yes.
So what did they witness?
The first thing that they witnessed was, I think, because he said, since we got a lot of people looking from somewhere, let us throw off everything that hinders.
Or the things that weigh.
They had witnessed that. And the sin that so easily entangles, they had witnessed that. They're part of it. They had their ups, they had their downs, they had their frailties, they had their mistakes.
Well,
and let us run with perseverance, because it's not a 100-yard dash. The race marked out for us. Then he just says, if you keep your eyes up on Jesus, that sin thing won't be near as detrimental as it is if you're without him. Without him, I don't need that. Well,
so here's my line.
God gives you over to a depraved mind.
Noted.
So.
They witnessed promises made, promises kept.
Now that's what I think. I think the overall point is that, and you saw God's they saw God's faithfulness in it.
That's right.
Even though they didn't, because think about Noah.
And some of them, it took their whole life. It took Noah his whole life.
He's like,
he gets back right there to the gospel, to Jesus right here.
Yep.
All right. But think about, so I think that's what he's saying. There's a transition here that they saw God keep his word, as difficult as that was. I mean, think about the little details of the story. Abraham having a son at 100, because it was based on a promise. So they saw
the mistakes made by all of them. There were
that's
mistakes made.
True. But they saw, Noah, he said, build the ark. Wow, there's rain coming. Well, did the rain come? Yeah. He saw God keep his word.
Yeah.
So basically, when you get to Jesus, it's the same. I mean, we're using all these moments and all these stories as a foundation, and they're witnessing God keeping his word and witnessing his faithfulness and his character in these things as a foundation for believing at what God said he would do through Jesus. Same. Right. So don't think, they're witnessing us. They're all, no. They were witnesses of God's promises, and we're surrounded by that. In the spiritual realm, yes, the spirits of men that God has made perfect. We're going to read that in the end of chapter 12. But more is just like what I said about the football analogy. These in the Hall of Fame, people that have gone on before you, same faith, different promise. I mean, same ultimate promise, I guess, but a different way of looking at it, because now it's promised to us in Jesus. I mean, that's why the only together with us would they be made perfect. Well, that's Jesus, because it went backwards.
Which is why that individually, no matter what promises they personally got from God and saw in their lifetime, everybody received the promise of salvation through their faith because of Jesus. And that's why he said it was with us.
Well, that's why I brought up yesterday that little pointing to these verses, consider him who endured such opposition from sinful men, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. That's why I said the first thing John the Baptist, when he saw all these so-called religious people, the teachers of the law, the high priests, and all of them, they were all there together. I mean, the first thing he did is said, "You brood of vipers," and from that point on, I mean, they got on Jesus like a mad dog on everything he did. You know, he's violating the Sabbath. He's blaspheming. He told some guy his sins were forgiven. He said, you know, he doesn't have the authority to do that. They just couldn't. And the Hebrew writer said, you need to be watching that and see how that works, because get ready, because your day's coming when you'll be attacked for doing what's right.
That's right.
No doubt about it.
Jase has made the point before, and he's right. You look at this, what the Hebrew writer, this is a watershed moment, because he's basically saying there were witnesses for the first 3,500 years of this history, because he goes all the way back. You know, it starts at the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
With Abel, you know, and it comes all the way forward. And now he's saying there's been such a seismic shift because Jesus has come.
Oh, yeah.
And now said the promise is available. So now the last 2,000 years of history, this is the era of witness up until to the moment we're sitting
Well,
in.
y'all took this hook, line, and sinker. I was hoping you'd do this, because I figured out a way, I think, to explain what you just said from the biblical perspective. Because if I finish reading this, so he says, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. Let us run the perseverance, the race marked out for us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame. And this is going to be a key component, this next phrase, in explaining this. And sat down at the right hand of the throne of God.
Yep.
Of course, then it said the verse you just read, consider him who endured such opposition from sinful men, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. So
Hang on, let's take a break.
So based on Hebrews 1:3 also, where he introduced the book saying, you know, God spoke various ways, but in the last day he spoke to us by his son, who through whom he made the universe. The Son is the radiance of God's glory. You remember this. He's the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things through his powerful word, which is what we're talking about. Is God's word true? Is it impossible for him to lie? If he says something, well, all these people are witnesses that, yep, it's impossible for him to lie. Whatever he says, he'll do. But then it says, after he provided purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty in heaven. Why does this keep coming up?
Mm-hmm.
Jesus sitting at the right hand of heaven.
You have to have it.
I think I figured this out. So if you go back and look at Luke's account of the ascension in 24:44, and I'm just going to make a point. I'm not going to read all this. You can do it in your own time. But my point is going to be, in Luke's account, in the book of Luke, it seems like we're looking back. We're like, you know, he raises his hands at the end, and he's basically saying farewell. But he also in 44 said that, now this is post-resurrection, his appearance right before he leaves. He says, this is what I told you while I was still with you. Everything must be fulfilled that is written about me in the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms. So they're all grasping with what has happened. This is basically signifying the end of Jesus's earthly stint, right?
Yep.
Well, the narrative kind of changes when the same guy, Luke, when he gets to Acts, all of a sudden it's all forward looking, because we're getting to the right hand of God here. And you say, what do you mean it's forward looking? Oh man, where's my section Acts?
You're in Acts 1.
Yeah, but
He's got some loose pages
my
there.
section here. Here we go. So then he says in Acts 1, in my former book, Theophilus, which we just read, I wrote about all that Jesus, when I never noticed this phrase before, but it says began to do. And he was taken up to heaven, which is Hebrews, you know, we're here in Hebrews 12, and this is significant because he's making a point about this new era. And so then everything seems to be forward looking because he says, I'm going to give you the Holy Spirit. It said he appeared to them over a period of 40 days and gave many convincing proofs that he was alive. And then he talked about pouring out the Holy Spirit. So, in verse 9 is a famous thing. After he said this, he was taken up and a cloud hidden from their sight. But then you remember these two men, angels, they said, look, he'll come back. It's still forward looking. And so you say, well, what's your point? My point is this new era signified what Jesus is doing now. And especially when you get to the end of Hebrews 12, it's like you've come to look at what you've come to, what you're a part of. It's not like Jesus left and he's gone. It's like he went to sleep, or I think a lot of people believe this. He's like, no, I'm going to supply the power. And so what did these people do? Well, they went out and started sharing Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
Through his power. And even in Hebrews 2, you remember it
whether
says
they were being killed or not.
Whether they were being killed or not. And I think that's the part that somehow we miss, I guess, that God is working now, present day. He's not. This is what he called us to do. This is the promise. This is the trust. Our little adventure, kind of like the Hall of Fame that we read.
It's
these
almost like
daily
we're ambassadors representing him as God were making his appeal
to
us.
You made this point before, Dad. We were talking about the section where we were talking about all the terrible things that happened to him. But do you realize that for the last 2,000 years, I would venture to guess, just because there's way more people, there have been far more people martyred for the name of Jesus than were martyred earlier before he got here.
You are correct.
I mean, he mentions that group, but think about it, because it all started in the first century, and we saw it. And Jay said it the other day. There's more people killed today in certain parts of the world than were even back then.
Look, there's about 50 or 75 of them. That's all. There wasn't that many of them. The founding fathers, they've got it down to about 5, 6, 7 of them. But if you had asked those men, what are you doing? They would have told you, we're representing Jesus on earth, planet Earth. That's what the founding fathers would have told you. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't have said, we're the founders. They would have said, oh, you're mistaken. We're not the founding fathers. Our founding father is God.
Yeah, that's right.
That's what they would have told him.
It's the beginning of the Declaration of Independence.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think what my point is like, so you take John 14, for instance, where he said, in my Father's house are many rooms, and I'll go, prepare a place for you. And you remember that conversation. Thomas was like, well, how do we know the way? And, he eventually said, I'm the way, I'm the truth, I'm the life. But I think
he was saying, if you know me, you know the way.
Well, right. But my point is, I'm just making a different point, which is I think most of us, and I was kind of guilty of this until I was reading this last night, we tend to think like, oh, Jesus is going to prepare a place for me for when I die. But it hit me last night that, no, he went and he's preparing a place for us while we're alive.
Mm-hmm.
Because I thought about the Colossians 3. It says, since you've been raised with Christ, set your mind on things above. Well, when? After I die? No, right now. And I think that's his whole point in Hebrews that they were failing to miss. They were coming out of a system that was leading people to God because of our lack of being able as humans to keep a law, to perform on a godly level. And so he's introducing Jesus, and now he's trying to say, look, Jesus is right at the right hand of God. I mean, not only did he die for your sins, not only was he resurrected, but he's here supplying the power. You can have God's Holy Spirit. And this is the new era. So you have the whole book of Acts. And used to, I thought they named it Acts because it's Acts of the Apostles. But now I feel differently. I think it's the acts of God through the apostles. That's what it is.
Yeah.
God is working. You know, the whole time in John, Jesus kept saying, you know, the Father's working. I'm at work. I must do my Father's work. The Father's working. Well, are we to believe that all of a sudden he stopped working?
Not at all.
And I think
that's what Al
what
was talking about a while ago. I mean, over the last 2,000 years, Al, there has been a giant part of humanity, including our founding fathers. They were godly to the core of their being. I don't care what these naysayers say. Well, they made mistakes. Well, they watched the human race is sin. We've seen that. We're all aware that sin's a problem. He mentions that.
Right.
But he said, but as far as I'm concerned, you read about people like our founding fathers, it's just amazing on how godly they were. I mean, they were godly men.
Oh, exactly. Well, that's what I was describing is what is the race? The race is that God is our Father. There is discipline involved, but he's our Father. He's a perfect parent. We have Jesus at the right hand of God, and the significance of that is that he showed us that a human, as he became a man, could enter heaven.
Yep.
And that's what the recipients of the Hebrew letter were having trouble wrapping their head around. We're like, well, wait a minute. We're not doing some sacrifices just to appease our sins. And God provided a sacrifice himself that we now as humans can enter heaven. And as long as he's there.
And remember, what did he say he was doing there? Back in Hebrews 8, 9, and 10. He's there as the high priest.
Yeah.
So he's working. In other words, he's working on our
I
behalf.
have that written
That's
down.
why
Look.
I don't want to be so redundant, but it needs to be. It's like the third president of the United States. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal, endowed by God. I mean, these were godly men. They made mistakes, founded the greatest nation on earth, and we're looking at that. And it's a little sneak preview on Hebrews chapter 12.
Yeah, but just think, Phil, as a human being, all of a sudden there was a human being here who has entered heaven. That is now a possibility.
Yeah.
Well, if I was a human being, I would say, you know what? Because he's at the right hand of God, do I have hope? It's more than hope.
It's the most.
It's an assured hope. It's like he broke the wall down of the dimension that I'm now trapped in, which is this planet.
The fourth wall. All right, so we're out of time, but we're going to expound on this a bit more in overtime. If you want to follow us over there to catch some more of this discussion from Jase's Epiphany, you can do that, blazetv.com/unashamed.
Thanks for listening to the Unashamed podcast. Help us out by rating us on iTunes. And don't miss an episode by subscribing on YouTube, and be sure to click that little bell to get notified about new episodes. And for even more content that you won't get anywhere else, subscribe to Blaze TV at blazetv.com/unashamed.